It's often said that every black cloud has a silver lining, and while that usually applies to seeing the bright side of life's biggest difficulties, it can also relate to finding something positive in an otherwise bad video game. As the following list demonstrates, there are even some cases of awesome weapons being hidden within terrible titles. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 awesome weapons trapped in terrible video games. Number 10. Volt Tornado, Mega Man X7. Released in 2003, Mega Man X7 arrived with high expectations. Not only was it following in the footsteps of its typically beloved predecessors, especially the first few games in the spin-off franchise, but it was also the X series' first foray into 3D. Sadly, it's since been heavily condemned for its exasperating camera, vexing controls, and lackluster bosses, as well as its unmemorable music and uninspired level designs. By and large, the only saving grace is the variety of firearms given to its main characters, Axel, X, and Zero. To some degree, each has their own arsenal. Even so, it's the Volt Tornado that impresses the most. Earned once Tornado Tunyon is beaten, its shocking spiral has considerable horizontal range, so it's great for dealing with multiple enemies at once. Plus, it can give life back to the player when charged by surrounding them in an electric field, so it can serve two great purposes at once. Obviously, it's pretty exciting to watch too. Number 9. Shrink-Ray, Duke Nukem Forever. After getting delayed several times over the course of nearly 15 years, this sequel to 1996's revered Duke Nukem 3D was criticized for its outdated or awkward physics, environments, graphics, and sophomoric humor. In other words, both consumers and industry insiders have been laughing at, rather than with, Duke Nukem Forever since 2011. Nevertheless, there are a few bright spots. As showcased in the misleadingly badass trailer, developer Gearbox Software gave players a wide array of idiosyncratically odd tools with which to unleash chaos. The best of the bunch is easily the Shrink-Ray, a noticeably altered carryover from Duke Nukem 3D when it was called the Shrinker. Sure, it's a fairly common accessory within the FPS genre, yet Duke Nukem Forever's Shrink-Ray earns points for being as useful as it is hilarious. Basically, it makes villains nearly a dozen times weaker and smaller. Naturally, Duke is able to step on them once they do, and it never gets old. Number 8. Cow Launcher, South Park. Long before the South Park video game catalog redeemed itself with knockouts such as the Stick of Truth and the Fractured But Whole, there was this calamitous self-titled debut. It came out at the very end of the 1990s, when the series was building steam following its first 2 seasons. So it's not surprising that this FPS falls in line with numerous other cash-in adaptations of popular movies and TV shows. Despite not playing well, to put it nicely, it's still a funny game, due mainly to its cache of characteristically weird weapons. From snowballs and toilet plungers to sniper chickens and Terrence and Phillip dolls, it's almost always amusing to dispatch enemies. That's particularly true when it comes to the Cow Launcher, which, as its name implies, is essentially a preposterous take on a rocket launcher. While it's a terrific way to conquer bosses in single-player mode, its greatest purpose is providing unending entertainment during multiplayer brawls. Number 7. Viblade, Perfect Dark Zero. The original Perfect Dark is among the most cherished FPS games of all time, which is why its substandard 2005 prequel, Perfect Dark Zero, is a grossly disappointing sequel and embarrassing launch title for the Xbox 360. Released in 2005, it was more concerned with tapping into the flourishing Halo zeitgeist than it was retaining the charm, quirkiness, and performance of its predecessor, or Rare's prior gem, a little-known game called GoldenEye 007. At least some of the visuals and animations were striking, as was some of protagonist Joanna Dark's deadly equipment. Dig no further than the Viblade, a masterpiece of melee massacring that equally matches style and substance. Taking its name from a combination of viper and blade, the silver sword is covered in cryptic glowing blue glyphs, so it looks cool as hell, especially when it turns red during its recharge period. In addition to cutting down opponents with ease, it produces a shield that deflects bullets, and what more could you ask for than that? Here's hoping that the Viblade is included in the Initiative/Crystal Dynamics' planned Perfect Dark reboot. Number 6. Pyramid/Eye, Twisted Metal 3. It's seldom a good sign, creatively or financially, when a franchise changes developers, as 1998's Twisted Metal 3 famously and egregiously demonstrates. Granted, anyone would have had trouble creating a worthy successor to Singletrack's masterful Twisted Metal 2. However, 989 Studios' overly broken and basic attempt failed to satisfy even the lowest of expectations. If nothing else though, some of Twisted Metal 3's weapons are excellent, and with all due respect to the spaceship, it's the pyramid, aka the Eye, that takes the cake. Found in the Egypt level after the player demolishes the sarcophagus on the wall, the pyramid acts as an extravagant remote bomb. Players plant an eye wherever they want in the level, and once it's activated, the pyramid will fire a laser at whatever is in that spot. Even cars in close vicinity of the target will be significantly damaged, and given the game's generally ugly graphics, its epic theatricality is the icing on the cake. Number 5. Harpoon Gun, Fast and Furious Crossroads. 2020's Fast and Furious Crossroads isn't the first video game based on the blockbuster movies. In fact, it's probably not even the worst, or to be fair, the greatest playable entry in the series. Rather, it's a mediocre at best interpretation whose story-driven globe-trotting mixture of racing and action RPG makes perfect sense in theory, it just crashes hard in the execution. Like its sibling films, it goes all out to give audiences ridiculously over-the-top set pieces, plot points, and devastating machinery. Case in point, the Harpoon Gun mounted to Letty's car, which she uses to rip several flamethrowers from the back of a tank during Fast and Furious Crossroads' prologue chase scene. Does it play well? No, it doesn't. Is the corresponding voice acting from Michelle Rodriguez and Vin Diesel as Letty and Dom respectively good? Of course not. Is it awesomely stupid and explosive in all the right ways? Absolutely, and that's more than enough for us. Number 4. Viblade, Mortal Kombat 4. As with many treasured franchises that made the leap from 2D to 3D decades ago, we're looking at you, Earthworm Jim and Castlevania, Mortal Kombat 4 paled in comparison to its precursors. Admittedly, its awful voice acting can be endearingly cheesy, and it popularized beloved baddies Quan Chi and Shinnok. Beyond that, however, just about everything else from the stages and roster to the graphics and fatalities were bland and repetitive. Honestly, its main saving grace is its assortment of pernicious tools, with each playable character having his or her own special means of dispatching competitors. Sonya Blade's Windblade outshines them all. Basically, it's a big pinwheel with huge knives instead of plastic or paper flaps, and it's precisely that inventive blend of absurdity and lethality that gives it the edge. Just imagine being taken down by something so disgracefully silly, yet fatal. Really, the Windblade flawlessly encapsulates Mortal Kombat's knack for goofiness and gore. Number 3. Cat Silencer, Postal 2. 2003's Postal 2 might be the best entry in the controversial series, but that doesn't mean it's praiseworthy in a technical and/or traditional sense. On the contrary, it doesn't look or play especially well, and its loading times are notoriously lengthy. Thus, its chronicle of the postal dude carrying out mundane tasks in a cartoonishly violent and imaginative way plants it firmly in the so bad it's good camp. That said, it's got tons of personality when it comes to how the main character carries out his carnage. In addition to your standard array of firearms and bombs, you get astoundingly bizarre add-ons such as the Cat Silencer. Unsurprisingly, using it involves sticking the barrel of your shotgun or machine gun into the animal's anus. Of course, your feline friend makes several distressed sounds, and once the clip is emptied, the cat is launched at whatever the player wants, where it blows up on contact. The Cat Silencer became so popular, it was even included in Uwe Boll's infamous 2007 Postal film adaptation. Number 2. Inflato-Ray, Saints Row 4. This is easily the most debatable inclusion on this list, as a lot of people really like Saints Row 4. However, its overly homogeneous and unattractive world and overpowered protagonist undoubtedly resulted in blander and more tedious of an experience than Saints Row the Third. After all, the protagonist gets superpowers way too easily, so there's very little difficulty, incentive to experiment with weapons, or need to use vehicles. That's particularly tragic since Saints Row 4 gives players numerous standout tools, such as the Rectifier Probe, Warped Weapon, Bounce Rifle, and Black Hole Launcher. Trumping all of those though is the Inflato-Ray. As its in-game description indicates, it quote-unquote inflates people. Rather than act as a traditional shotgun, it fires a laser beam that forces enemies to swell gradually until they burst and shower the surrounding area in entrails. It comes in several sleek styles too, and victims look hilarious as they expand. Number 1. The Power of God, The Simpsons Wrestling. The Simpsons have been incorporated into plenty of odd video game genres, and while they sometimes work well, such as in the case of Road Rage or Hit and Run, they're often just abysmal, like The Simpsons Skateboarding and Bart vs. the Juggernauts. Clearly, the biggest offender is 2001's The Simpsons Wrestling. Childhood nostalgia notwithstanding, it's one of the worst wrestling games ever made, with extremely poor mechanics and limited fighting options, making it too frustrating and constrained to be fun. Thankfully, the annoyingly wholesome Ned Flanders serves as the holy light in the darkness with his special attack, the Power of God. Simply put, he kneels and summons highly damaging bolts of lightning from the heavens. What's more, he often foreshadows the move by yelling, "Oh, you better run before I go all Old Testament on you," or "Heavenly powers, comp diddly you." Frankly, it's hard to imagine a more awesome weapon, supernatural or not, being trapped in a more terrible video game. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment box if you got any more ideas for awesome weapons that are unfortunately trapped in terrible video games. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm @JessMcDonnell, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more great gaming lists.